Medically, how do you define if one's life is worth fulfilling or terminating? How do you make a choice about something that is currently inside of you, something that is part of you? It's really hard. Unfortunately, many women face this difficult decision in Canada. Down syndrome is a genetic condition caused by having an extra chromosome 21. People with Down syndrome can have a range of physical and developmental differences, including learning delays, low muscle tone, shorter height, and certain facial features. During pregnancy, conditions like Down syndrome can be identified through prenatal screening tests like maternal serum screening, MSS, which we get into later. Tests like these don't give a definitive answer, but they estimate the chance that a baby may have Down syndrome. If the results show a higher chance, parents are then faced with a decision about whether to do further testing, how to prepare, or in some cases, whether to continue the pregnancy. Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of Undocumented Health. I'm your host, Brooklyn. As a young person, I haven't had to face this kind of decision myself, nor am I expected to anytime soon. That's why I've brought in my mom, Nikki, to share her experiences with prenatal screening for Down syndrome in the early 2000s and to discuss how things have changed in recent years. Our goal is to give a well-rounded perspective for anyone who is pregnant or knows someone who is so they can make an informed decision. Thank you so much for joining me, Mom. I'm really glad you're here to share your experience with our listeners.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, before we get in, let's talk a little bit about what prenatal screening looked like in the early 2000s. So, from my understanding, the technology that you would have experience with is the maternal serum screening, as you had kids in the early to late 2000s. Is this correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, just for our listeners tuning in, MSS is a blood test offered during pregnancy that estimates the chance of certain conditions like Down syndrome, Edwards syndrome, and birth defects. There are two main times this test can be done. In the first trimester, between about 9 and 13 weeks, it involves both a blood test and an ultrasound. The ultrasound measures fluid at the back of the baby's neck called nuchal translucency, which can be linked to certain genetic conditions. In the second trimester, between about 14 and 20 weeks, the test is just a blood sample. This is also when birth defects are screened for. So, what this test is actually looking at, MSS measures specific proteins in the mother's blood. So then combines that information with factors like the mother's age and sometimes ultrasound results to estimate risk. The results are usually given as either a low chance or an increased chance, and so again, it's not a diagnostic tool. So I know it's been a long time, but do you remember, what do you remember about the screening and what went into your decision of whether to do it or not?
So I was first introduced to this screening in 2003 when I had you as a new mom and young. I was only 20. A little confused, not sure what was going on. Um, but the nurses were great. They explained that you could get false positives and false negatives, and that if they had received a positive indication that they had Down syndrome, we would have the chance to abort the baby. And because the percentages were not enough of a chance that I felt were a liable decision to make it to abort a baby, I decided not to take it because I didn't feel like taking that 50-50 chance of them being wrong was worth the risk.
Yeah, I think for me too, it's interesting that it's not that diagnostic test. It's really just a probability. And it makes me wonder, like, does knowing that actually change anything for someone, especially when it's your child? I feel like there's a bit of an ethical side to these decisions that people don't always talk about, and it's a difficult thing to kind of digest. Looking from it from another perspective, why do you think some mothers choose to find out if their baby might have Down syndrome or another condition during pregnancy?
I feel like some women, depending on their age, because as you get older in your pregnancies, I want to say above 30 to 40, your higher risk of disability and a child is higher. So depending on them doing, so many different tests, and if they had, different chances where they couldn't have a child, and this is kind of like their only way of having a child, it might determine if they want somebody with a disability or a healthier child. So they're more likely maybe to take the test to kind of prepare themselves if that were the case. I feel like if women are taking the test, it's more of a planning process of like, how do we understand this disease? What do I need to do to prepare my family if I have other children, or just, reading up on the disease and knowing more before it happens.
Yeah, I also think it's just that some people might feel more prepared if they know ahead of time, like that piece that you're talking about. It's not to say that someone couldn't adapt or find support, but I think it just gives you that time to find it. And I think that some families, it's about feeling that mental and emotional readiness to have the child.
Yep.
Now, I want to advance our topic a little bit here and talk about some newer technology that we have here in Ontario. So, NIPT, or non-invasive prenatal testing, is a newer type of screening for conditions like Down syndrome. Instead of just looking at proteins in the mother's blood, like in the MSS, NIPT actually looks at small pieces of the baby's DNA that are circulating in the mother's blood during pregnancy. So, because of this, it's more accurate than the MSS. As it detects about 99% of Down syndrome cases compared to around 70% with traditional screening, and it has a much lower false positive rate. But even with that higher accuracy, it's still not considered a diagnostic test. If the results come back as high chance, you still need further testing to confirm it. However, I will know in Ontario, NIPT is mostly private. So you're looking at about $800 or more through some funding. Some funding is available for specific indications through approved providers and such. But I'm just curious if advances in the Down syndrome screening technology has changed your perspectives or if you have any thoughts about this newer technology.
No, I don't think so. Not that I want to be surprised, but I feel like if it is, it is, and if that's how it's going to be, um, you just make it work. I just feel like there's already stress on a pregnancy already, that sometimes if you're overthinking something, things get worse. And I felt like, you know what, I'd want to enjoy the 9 months and do the best that I can.
Yeah, I think the money part is interesting too, right? Like who has that much money to spend on a confirmation in that case, as well as I think it's just the reassurance is always going to be there. People are going to want to know. It's inevitable.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking quote from an article by Paul Dick in 1996. So, selective abortion has been criticized for compromising the ideals of medicine by rejecting the weak and the sick, and for focusing on problematic genes rather than society's response to people with disabilities. Society may interpret the availability of diagnosis of fetal Down syndrome and subsequent termination as an implicit message that having Down syndrome is undesirable. Do you agree or disagree with the statement today?
I agree. I feel like sometimes they can use it as a way out. And if we all just take our homework and we learn about it, we can adapt.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been measures recently to try and reduce the stigma of Down syndrome. Like, I think there's a lot of positivity associated with it, especially with the use of technology and social media, kind of seeing the behind the scenes of what Down syndrome actually looks like, and it's not as criticized so much. But then again, I still don't think we're quite there. There's still stigma, and if we have these tests, it's just reinforcing that we do have stigma instead of realizing that these people do deserve to live, and it doesn't have to be as negative as people see their lives being.
Yeah, definitely.
So, thank you so much for joining me, Mom, and sharing your perspective for our listeners. I hope today's conversation offers some insights into the challenges, choices, and ethical considerations surrounding prenatal screening. This is Undocumented Health signing out. See you in the next episode.